Senator Dixon.
Absent.
Senator Moore.
Here.
Senator Mallow.
Presidente.
Senator McLaurin.
I'm here.
Senator Lucas.
Not here.
Senator Anavitarte.
Sure.
Senator Ginn.
Nope. Absent.
Senator Still.
Absent. No.
Senator Gooch.
Not here. Absent.
Senator Beach.
Not here.
Is he physically, do you think he's out taking pictures? Well, do you think he's taking photos of his billboard right now?
He's practicing his signature.
I called him this morning when I saw it. I said, if I weren't driving, I'd get a picture.
Recognize Senator McLaurin.
I just have a question. This is just a question. Has there been independently reported coverage confirming from the Trump administration that this appointment has happened? Because so far, it's just a question.
I had wondered if somebody had hired because he got a call from the president on Monday. I'm like, what if this whole thing is a goof and somebody actually went to the step of hiring like a Trump impersonator, had the Trump impersonator call him? I don't think that's happening, but AI could have been involved. Hey! You're live, Senator Mallow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I believe the Senator, Brandon Beach, just landed and got off Air Force One, so I would believe that appointment is legitimate.
Chairman Beach, we did a roll call. You weren't here. We were wondering whether or not you were out taking a photo of the billboard on the connector. And
I did see that today for the first time.
and then you have officially, the question was proffered whether this has officially been announced, but you have received a call from the boss himself, as I understand it, is what they call it.
The president called me on Monday. I was actually sitting here in finance, and I got a text from the White House saying, POTUS will call you in 30 minutes. Have your phone on. So, and then I went and got the call, and he called me to let me know he signed the paperwork.
That's awesome. Congratulations. We're happy for you.
Thank you.
And we'll go ahead and get started because we got a couple bills to get through today. 4 bills exactly. Welcome to the Senate Transportation Committee, everyone. We like to have a little fun, but we also can do some serious work as well. And we are going to start with House Bill 244. Chairman Bonner. Oh, I'm sorry. That's why he didn't move when I said the bill number. 224.
Make sure I had the right one.
Chairman, I'm going to ask you a question. So far, not present in this committee is Senator Dixon, Lucas, Still, Gooch, those senators. Who do you think will be the next senator to arrive?
I'm going to say Senator Gooch.
Senator Gooch, all right. Well, we got a Still, all right.
What are my choices?
Dixon for 200.
Dixon for 200.
We got a couple Dixons. Senator Anavitarte.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think any of them will come.
Oh. Chairman Beach.
Gooch.
You going Gooch? All right.
Take a ride.
They sees him in the window.
When and if the leader arrives, let's all erupt in thunderous applause. Chairman Bonner, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Bringing you House Bill 224. This is a measure that was brought to me by Colonel Mark Alston. He's the garrison commander for Fort Stewart. And initially, the initial conversations he was having with Georgia Department of Transportation, they thought they may could accomplish this directly with an agreement with the DOT. What we determined is that it does require legislation to allow the state of Georgia to enter into an intergovernmental support agreement with the Department of Defense that will allow the Georgia DOT to do work on our military installations. It would not preclude in any way the installations from continuing with the federal contracting practice, which they would certainly do for larger projects. This would allow them to contract with the DOT and then whatever sub-vendors the DOT had in order to do some maintenance work and some smaller projects. The benefit of this for our installations is to get that work done that much faster. And the benefit for Georgia is the fact that we'll be able to utilize Georgia vendors. There's no cost to the state for this, and the way those contracts are done is that they pay up front prior to the work being done. So you may have received a letter possibly from Major General Norrie, who is the commander of the 3rd Infantry Division, in support of this legislation, and I'll be ready to stand for any questions that you have.
Thank you. I don't see any questions. What's the pleasure of the committee? I have a motion to do pass from Chairman Anavitarte. I have a second from Senator Mallow. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Good to see you. Who's going to carry this bill for you in the Senate, Chairman Bonner? Okay. All right. Next up is Chairman Leverett here. Oh, you're in the back. You're hiding. You're hiding from those taxi drivers. Let's move on to House Bill 339. Chairman Leverett, would you like to take a wager as to who will be the next senator to arrive to this highly...
The choices were the leader, Dixon.
Still,
Has anyone
Lucas?
put money on Still yet?
Lucas is gone.
Oh, you did? Yeah, I don't.
Met him in the parking lot.
So you've got everybody in the, everybody's put money on everybody.
Yeah, but you can double down on somebody if you'd like.
I'm going to double down on Majority Leader.
Okay, we got a lot of faith today in Leader Gooch.
Is it okay if I call him?
You may need his vote. We'll see what happens.
No, I just might.
All right, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. It's a pleasure to be here before y'all today. I believe this is my maiden voyage before the Transportation Committee, so I'm pleased to be here. Congratulations to one of your members on his new promotion. We look forward to seeing him go up to D.C. and all the great things he'll do. And if you, Mr. Treasurer, if you find any rooms up there where they keep the money they're about to burn, if you'd call me, I could help you with that. I trust you. I guarantee you. So I appreciate, Mr. Chairman, you're putting this bill on the agenda today. This is a bill that it's got two sections in it, basically. Section 1 is largely just a cleanup section, which Legislative Council asked to place in the bill because an earlier version of it did touch Title 40. And we still touch Title 40, but we were touching that particular part or article, and it's just simply clean up on a definition. It is no real substantive change. The primary function of the bill is in Section 2.
Will you confirm your LC number for us really quick?
Yes, I'm sorry. It's LC 394702S.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so this is not changing the substantive law concerning these rideshare service drivers. It's just confirming it in code. Right now, it's basically, there is a fairly exhaustive code section in the employment security section title, which Chairman Chad Jones sponsored several years ago, that just confirms when an employee is an employee and when he's an independent contractor. And under that test, these drivers in these situations are clearly independent contractors. Cases are routinely dismissed if the claim is based solely on vicarious liability, but they still keep filing them. And so this would just place in code that rule so that it would sort of serve as notice to potential plaintiffs. And there are some exceptions in here based on failure to conduct the background checks or committing a criminal act. And so we believe this is a good restatement of the law. It is not opposed in its current form by anyone that we're aware of, and I think that indicates it is just simply a restatement of law, but there is a reason to put that in code.
So it's your position you're not changing anything here. As you and I have had conversations, you have communicated essentially that for these rideshare networks, they are being told by their insurance companies that this language is necessary for them to see a reduction in rates. I think you've given me even some statistics around current rates as they relate to other states, and can you highlight that for us?
I don't recall those statistics. I believe we have some folks here who could provide them to you, but the chairman is correct. That's the other function of this, is it would help with the underwriting and the rates that are applied to them. And as you know, the drivers are required to keep sort of heightened levels of insurance, and so that's part of the distinction for them as well.
All right, I'm going to go to a couple questions from the committee. Senator McLaurin.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you,
Good to
Representative.
see you again.
So a couple things just to kind of, you get more comfortable with something you put in your own words, even if you're being redundant, right? So you are restating in the sense that Uber, Lyft, other rideshare drivers are considered independent contractors. Now, maybe in some litigation, there's some sort of pierce the veil on a case-by-case basis, but the general rule is that they're not, and this would prevent the case-by-case litigation.
I believe that's correct, yes, sir.
Okay, so I mean, you could say it's a change in the sense that it clarifies we're going to adhere to the contractor interpretation across the board, and then I guess the exceptions, which I'm glad to see in the bill, are almost like specifically known harms or sources of heightened duty that we want to put it specifically enumerate in code to make sure that even though there's an independent contractor relationship, that Uber and Lyft and other rideshare companies are doing their diligence to prevent known threats or harms.
That's correct, and I think those exceptions were placed in there because the language of the statute is a bit broad. It's intended to confirm vicarious liability, but it does say any theory, and those exceptions are mainly relating to situations where Uber or Lyft have direct responsibility, not vicariously through their employee, because they failed to do something they were supposed to do.
Sure, and I mean, I guess, I joked once with a member of the majority that even my support for the right to trial by jury has limits. Yeah, whether people believe that or not.
I don't think anyone believes that.
Yeah, right. But I guess my question is sort of, to me, this bill seems more about the definition of an independent contractor relationship as opposed to employee relationship as anything else. And, I guess that's kind of what I'm trying to get at is, are we basically just saying we want to draw a hard line and categorically say as a matter of Georgia law, these are independent contractors, they should be treated that way?
I think that's true, although I would contend they clearly are under the other, the statutory test we have for employee versus independent contractor.
Sure, but like with the Fair Business Practices Act, sometimes we just compute the answer and put it in code without
correct.
referring to a weighty, balancing test of some kind. So
That's, I think you are correct. We're just simply trying to confirm what the law is from other sources.
okay, thank you, Representative.
Thank you for the question.
Yeah.
Chairman Moore.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Help me understand, you said earlier the insurance burden is simply shifting. And if Uber isn't having to pay the insurance at a higher rate, that burden is now just being transferred over to the Uber driver, right? So it appears to me that if this legislation passes, Uber drivers are going to have to pay more for their own insurance. Is that correct?
I don't believe that's correct because, again, we're not really shifting anything. We're just confirming what's already been done by other applicable law.
Can you point to what you mean by this is just mirroring what is already in law?
Well, there is a statute 34-8-35, and that was in House Bill 389 about 3 years ago. That was Chairman Jones's legislation that confirmed when a employee or an independent contractor truly is an independent contractor. The established law in pretty much every state is if you're an independent contractor, your employer doesn't have vicarious liability if you do something wrong. So, for example, if I'm an independent contractor and I'm driving my car and I hit someone, my employer would not be liable for the act I just committed if I'm an independent contractor. If I'm an employee, if the employer controls the manner in which I work for him or her, then they can have vicarious liability. So this is just confirming that rule, which is independent contractors do not create vicarious liability for their employer. And so I don't believe this is going to change anything with respect to the insurance that the drivers already have to carry. And they have to carry, I think, $1 million limits. They have much more heightened limits on the insurance they have to carry. So they're certainly well insured. I don't believe it's going to affect their rates, but as we've heard recently, you don't always know what impacts rates, and you can't always predict them, but I don't believe it will.
Okay, so I'm a patron at the Atlanta airport, and I'm scheduling a rideshare service. That rideshare service is going to assign a driver to me, right? And I can't change that driver unless I'm willing to pay a fee, right? So I can look at that driver, but I just have to accept that or have to pay more to cancel that ride and schedule another one. And also that rideshare service is designating to that driver what's the best route to take me to a certain location, right?
I frankly, I don't know, because that's what you young people do, is Lyft and Uber. I usually call it taxi, but I'll accept the premise of the question.
Okay. Don't you think the rideshare should be held liable if they're responsible for directing the route and assigning the driver to me as a patron?
I don't, because they're, again, under established law, you're acting as an independent, or the driver is acting as an independent contractor. That's the term under which they accept the ability to be a Lyft or Uber, driver. And so I don't believe there ought to be direct liability in that case. Otherwise, you're upturning established law that applies to every employment situation.
But I'm not having direct communication with the driver until I've had direct communication with the rideshare app.
True, but I don't believe that's legally dispositive of the issue.
But ultimately, I have a preference on whether I use Lyft or whether I use Uber based on previous experience, and they're the ones who are dictating who the drivers are. I don't know what the agreement is between the driver and the rideshare, right?
Well, I hope you do now, but I would assume in the past you might not have, yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman, Senator, again, you're recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm old school like you, Rob. Said I don't have an app. I'm ignorant on it, but I have written in a cab before, and one of the things I've got a amendment that I wanted to talk with you about. This bill is specifically about rideshare drivers. Me and you are old school. Why don't we do this for taxis and limousines as well?
Well, I will tell you why, because it'll kill my bill and I'd like to get it passed. That's the short answer.
Elaborate on that if you would.
Well, as it's drafted, we were able to secure the consent of various parties to the bill and the agreement they would be neutral or would not oppose it. I believe it will be opposed if you add those other professions, if you will. And I think part of the reason is because they don't have the heightened insurance requirement that Uber and Lyft drivers do.
Cab companies don't carry as much insurance
The
as.
company may, but the driver doesn't.
Well, who owns the car while
I don't
riding a
know.
cab?
That's not my bill.
Yeah, is your opposition in the House or in the Senate?
I think it's everywhere.
Okay. Maybe we can talk offline.
Be glad to continue that. I would ask that, Mr. Chairman, that we not amend the bill in that particular manner.
Any other questions?
And appreciate Senator again very much. He's one of my senators, but I just would rather not amend the bill in that way.
Thank you, Chairman. We do have a couple of people signed up to speak, so I'll have you grab a seat and we'll give
Okay.
you a chance to respond to people that speak to the bill. Looks like Michelle Blackwell, you're up first. And let us know who you are and what your position is.
Good afternoon. My name is Michelle Blackwell. I'm here on behalf of Uber. I'm just here to answer some questions. We are obviously in support of this legislation because we just think that this just codifies current practice as what's been happening that we've seen in courts. And so I'm just here for any questions that you may have.
So if this codifies current law, I got this a little bit with Representative Leverett. Can you speak to why this is important for you guys this session?
Yeah, so one of the things that we've been focused on is lowering our cost of insurance. Right now in Georgia, at least looking at, I think, the previous month, 21% of every rider's trip goes directly to insurance. It has fluctuated, but it typically stays around between 21 to almost 25%. When you look at neighboring states like North Carolina, you're looking at 12%. South Carolina is 13%. And I believe Texas is 15%. And so one of the things we are trying to do is lower cost here to make rides affordable for Georgians.
Michelle, who would you, if you were to vote for the next senator to arrive to this committee, who would you vote for? I was hoping you were going to answer without looking over your shoulder to see that Leader Gooch was. Leader Gooch, I got to tell you, you were the leading contender by far. People had the most faith in your prompt arrival, so welcome to the committee. So, Michelle, have you guys got, it's my understanding, yeah, I'll keep that in confidence. You have actually, Uber, I should say, has been told by their insurance carrier or carriers that this would result in a premium reduction. Is that correct?
I need to confirm that that explicitly has been told to us, but we know when we were calculating insurance costs, when looking at in terms of liability, lawsuits and the such, that does impact our insurance cost.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Nick Giuliano with Impact Public Affairs, represented Uber past 12, 13 years. Referring to some of the questions earlier, I just want to do a little bit of table setting on how insurance works and how this independent contractor status and this bill kind of compute together. So to be clear, when a driver is in an accident, Chairman Moore, to your question earlier, when a driver is in an accident and they are logged on to a rideshare platform, Uber or Lyft, that is Uber's insurance or Lyft's insurance that engages there. The driver does not pay for that policy. It is not their personal policy. That is a $1 million policy that Uber or Lyft has purchased and that's on that ride. So there's no, the driver isn't paying separately for insurance. It's not their personal insurance. That is borne entirely by the company. This bill does not touch that. It doesn't touch the insurance requirement. The reason for the bill and how it computes with the current statute is that due to HB 389, which passed out back in 2022 under Chairman Todd Jones's leadership, that bill explicitly said that if you are a rideshare driver, you are an independent contractor. So not the balancing test, nothing else, just simple definitional. So right now, drivers are by law independent contractors, and they are covered by Uber or Lyft's insurance. What this bill does is it puts belt and suspenders on that independent contractor statute to say that no vicarious claim is explicitly possible. Now, right now, and I know I'm not in Judy, I'm in transportation, but when somebody attempts a vicarious lawsuit against Uber or Lyft right now, the rideshare companies have universally prevailed on the motion to dismiss because they cite the statute. They say this is an independent contractor. There's no vicarious liability. That has been true 100% of the time. But by putting this into place, what we're trying to do is save the time on the motion to dismiss, put people on notice that this is not a possible route to a claim. It says explicitly, to Senator McLaurin's point, direct liability is absolutely possible if there's been negligence on the part of the rideshare company. And I want to say we spent a lot of time working with the Georgia Trial Lawyer Association and coming up with agreed upon language, so I want to thank them. Taxis carry general motorist liability limits, and limos also have limits that are well below $1 million. So and they don't have an independent statutory determination of independent contractor status like rideshare companies do. So that's why this bill only deals with ride sharing.
Got a couple of questions here. I recognize Senator Mallow for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm just going to apply my public school education on this, Mr. Giuliano, and ma'am, I can't remember your name because I was doing some math. So if it's 23% of every ride goes to the cost of insurance, and that is borne by Uber, Lyft, and totality, that cost is then passed down to the rider. All right, so if a trip is, I just recently took an Uber today, actually. It was $20.39. If 23% of that, that'd be about $4.68. That means it's $15.71 remaining. What portion goes to the driver and what goes back to Uber and Lyft if it's 23% of all costs? And then to counteract that question, if you all carry the umbrella policy for each driver, why is it not based on the aggregate cost of the insurance in total, and why is it broken down to 23% of each share? Because to me it sounds kind of like you're double dipping.
So in terms of the take rate, I will be frank with the committee that does fluctuate. There are various factors in terms of how much we take. And so I would have to necessarily look at that specific trick that you took, time of day, demand, and the like. So it's a little difficult for me to tell you exactly how much was taken. Our global take rate is around 20%, 20 to 25%. But I can get back to you in terms of the take rate on maybe average in Georgia.
Yeah, what's the take rate in Georgia? We're legislating in Georgia, not globally.
I totally understand, which is why I can get back to you, Senator.
So 2 points. It's a great question. So the take rate can actually change dependent with insurance on the ride, which requires a long explanation. But to your point on the umbrella policy, it's an umbrella policy for the state. There's not a separate policy for each ride. So when you look at a 23%, that's a looking at our total cost that have been then averaged across however many million rides. Does that follow, Senator?
So you get one policy, you get a cost for that policy, you divide the costs back to each of your carriers, and how do you continuously divide a cost up over every ride? You don't know how many rides you're gonna have. It should just be, is there a threshold that once you hit this cap, you're no longer taking that from the driver, and then they get more in the fare once they drive enough and hit the cap, or you just keep hitting them for 23% every time you want to?
No, that is an average rate across many rides. So that's us looking backwards in time and saying, okay, well, what were our insurance costs for this month? How much money came in? What was the average rate? And backing into it that way.
When I saw an ad that y'all ran just on Monday, and it said you got 23% of every ride was in insurance. So either it's 23% of every ride moving forward, or if you're looking back saying it was an average of 23%, you still took that money from the actual driver who's a subcontractor. So my thing is, how does the driver know that they paid what the freight was in insurance, or do you get to just say it's the cost of insurance, and that's why I'm hitting you for 23% of the fare every time?
Well, it's 23% off the aggregate, not a 23% that's necessarily dipping into the take rate. But
in your ad, you said 23% of every ride.
I believe there was a clarification that said the previous month, so to.
That's not what the ad said. I got it.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Mello. Recognize Senator McLaurin for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, not that arcane legal concepts matter anymore, but to the extent that they might. Vicarious liability, product liability, I mean, these are defined theories that have existed since we took law from England and called it ours. And the sense I get, I mean, what I learned in law school at least, vicarious liability means you have a principal and an agent, and the agent is acting on behalf of the principal, most typically in the employment context. And what the employer does, what the employee does, the employer is responsible for in a vicarious liability theory, because the employee is considered to be like an arm of the employer. And what I'm trying to understand, and I think you've made very clear, under Georgia law, we have stipulated that Uber, Lyft, rideshare are marketplaces. They are basically digital gathering spaces or places where independent contractors are given a platform to conduct their own business, is more or less the legal theory. So as far as I'm aware, there's no basis at the common law or the traditional concepts of these types of liability to hold the organization, the corporation here, responsible for what the independent contractors are doing. And I'm not misunderstanding that, correct?
Unless there's been negligence on the part of the company. So unless we have failed to run a background screening properly,
right,
or there was a pattern of behavior that had been demonstrated, right, then you can get negligence and you can pierce that. But absent a fact finding like that.
Right.
Yes.
I mean, tell me if I'm misunderstanding what's happening with kind of the popular imagination. People who might be thinking of Uber as an employer, or thinking of Uber as who they're getting the service from directly, are thinking of the drivers as the arms or tentacles of Uber in a way that just legally they're not. And so they're filing lawsuits, notwithstanding that current law is already going to block their relief, but there's a lack of understanding by some plaintiffs when they file.
Correct.
And then they find out quickly. And so this is, I mean, we've had a couple bills come through this committee in the last few weeks where we are buttoning up belt and suspenders in current law because of we want to reduce the delay before everybody gets to the right answer, or we want to reduce the cost that's paid before we get to the inevitable right answer. And it seems to me that this bill falls in that category.
Exactly. We're trying to unclog the courts
Okay.
and stop these motions that invariably fail on a motion to dismiss.
Okay. I can understand that. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Chairman Moore.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, so say I'm a plaintiff and I'm suing the rideshare company for, say, an Uber driver who rear-ended me at the airport. Okay, the driver wouldn't have been there had he or she not been, participating in the rideshare program.
That's right.
So if I'm a plaintiff and I'm suing the rideshare company, am I now just going to have to sue the driver himself?
No, Chairman, no. So this is only dealing with vicarious liability. What you're referring to is direct liability as a result of an accident.
Like direct action?
Different theory, but it's
Okay.
the direct is there, right? So if there's an accident today and it occurs on the Uber platform or the Lyft platform, and you're in an accident with a rideshare driver, and that rideshare driver is found to be at fault for that accident, Uber or Lyft's umbrella insurance, that big $1 million policy, is kicking in, and you're right there with that insurance.
Okay, so what does this bill
is
do
not
then?
It's dealing with the vicarious theory, which is separate from these types of accidents, and says, okay, well, we're going to try to go beyond that $1 million policy, and we're going to say that the driver was acting on behalf of Uber and trying to get a vicarious tort. So it's a different type of action.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Chair Moore. Go to, is that you, Senator Still?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the appropriate time, I'd like to make a motion.
All right, we do have a couple more people that have signed up to testify, and I've got one more question here from Senator Mallow as well, but I will come to you in a minute, Senator Still.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Follow-up question. How does it work when you have someone who's an Uber driver, and let's say the Uber driver lets someone else drive under their profile? How does that work? What does that do in this situation?
That's insurance fraud, and that's against the terms of the service, and that driver would be thrown off the platform.
Okay, but what's the mechanism for you to ensure that the person on the app is the person that's driving the car? Do you, every time they click it on, do you verify who they are?
There's facial identification.
Facial ID.
There's facial ID.
You get it started. But if it were to happen, what's the recourse? If you say, oh, that person wasn't a driver, but the person was a subcontractor, the subcontractor person says, but 23% of all my rides are supposed to be for insurance. I mean, explain that. I'm from, down I-16, so maybe the news travels a little slower. I'm just trying to understand it.
They've in that scenario, they've engaged in fraud, right? So there would be every legal recourse that you would think of in terms of a civil action, and on Uber's end, that would be fraudulent behavior. They would be thrown off the app. And actually, in some jurisdictions, although it's not yet the case in Georgia, but in some jurisdictions, that would be classified as impersonating a rideshare driver, which can carry criminal penalties.
I would also say that certainly the vicarious liability should not apply in that. I mean, as we've mentioned earlier, we have not been held vicariously liable in the state of Georgia, but in this instance, if there's someone who is committing insurance fraud, we certainly don't have a relationship with that individual at all. So, I mean, this bill doesn't necessarily change that scenario, but I will say if someone is pretending to be an Uber driver, we don't have a relationship with that person.
And my last question is, do y'all police the people who do it? Do you inspect to ensure that the subcontractors is who they say they are?
We do.
Wow.
We have ongoing security checks to ensure that individuals, because the state of Georgia has requirements that we have to meet. We also just have background checks requirements that we have to do. And so in order to be in compliance with what we're required to do here in Georgia, and also just to keep the platform safe, we have ongoing safety features.
And DPS is the regulator.
Save that for Leverett, because he'll know more than these people. All right, guys, thank you all for coming forward. I see no more questions. I do want to call Les Schneider forward. Matthew, I see that you signed up. You just said you're available for questions, so we will probably skip you unless you object. Les, go ahead and grab a seat. Tell us who you're with and your position on the bill, please.
Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, my name is Les Schneider, and I'm here today on behalf of the Georgia Atlantic Limousine Association and also a number of taxi companies. I disagree with some of the characterizations that have been made, but I know I've talked to all of you except I didn't get a chance to talk to the chairman, but if in fact you're going to accept this vicarious liability and the elimination of it, what we are asking for today is that you treat the taxi and limo companies exactly the way you're trying to treat Uber and Lyft and the ride shares. And this is new law that will, allow that insulation of liability that you all have talked about. And please understand that there are other companies. Let's say I'm a limousine company and I have 2 cars, and I'm not able to handle anything more than 2 because it's Super Bowl weekend. So I call Senator Burns' company and say, hey, I have a ride that I can give you. And he says, that's great, I have a limo and I can take care of it. So I am doing, in that instance, the same thing that Uber and Lyft is doing. It could be through the digital network, et cetera. So all we're asking is that taxis and limo companies that refer rides to other taxi and limo companies make sure that they get the same protection that you all are, it appears to me, about to give Uber and Lyft. We, again, not a famous legal theory, but what's good for the goose is good for the gander here. We should treat everybody the same who is in the transportation industry. We are not asking for a limousine company that has their own employees to have vicarious, to eliminate vicarious liability. But it's very clear that there's a number of companies and limo and taxi companies, because they're smaller, who refer rides to other taxi and limousine companies. So at the appropriate time, I'd like to share an amendment with you on that. This is new, but that's fine. If that's what the body wants to do, to give this vicarious liability exemption, then we're just asking for the same treatment, because we're in the same industry. The other issue that's been talked about a lot is insurance. Let me make something very clear. In the original bill that passed relating to ride shares and taxis and Ubers, where we tried to have a level playing field, taxis and limos have to have commercial insurance, which is more expensive than the insurance that the ride shares have through the surplus line insurance. I have talked to various taxi and limo companies, and the 24% that I hear talked about today, I seriously question. In addition, the Uber or Lyft driver has to have a for-hire endorsement on his or her own insurance policy, and on top of that, there is the surplus line from Uber and Lyft. And again, the percentages that I'm hearing from taxi and limo companies as to what percentage of their total revenue, what percentage is due to insurance, is a large difference. And I just have a hard time believing the 24%. But if the committee wants to accept the 24%, we still have the same issue. We need to treat everybody the same and not have a different criteria. Let's talk about background checks. Taxis and limos get checked out on a background check for all drivers through the Department of Driver Services. This takes about 10 days. They go through GCIC, NCIC, and a thorough, not only checking their driving record, but their criminal history. Not the case with the rideshare. They do their own background check that takes about 24 to 48 hours, and I don't think is as vigorous as what the limousine and taxi industry does. The employer-independent contractor relationship works with these taxi and limo companies the same way they're working with Uber and Lyft. So again, I don't see the reason why it should be treated the same. The idea that we should not do an amendment here to treat everybody the same because it may kill the bill when the bill passed the House 166 to nothing. I don't think we ought to make a legislative decision and take small businesses, which is what most taxi and limo companies are, and say we're going to treat you worse than we're going to treat large rideshare companies like Uber and Lyft. I am not saying do not pass this bill, but I would like you to consider the amendment, and with your indulgence, Chairman, if the people in the committee could see the amendment, I could talk through it. Would that be okay?
You have a question. Let's go to the question first, and then
Sure.
Chairman Beach.
So what kind of insurance do limos and taxis have to carry?
They have commercial insurance, and the rate and the amount is as high as, if not higher, than what the ride shares would have. And in fact, in the law that we passed years ago, I don't think we even prescribe a particular insurance level for the ride share. But again, commercial insurance is much more expensive than the surplus line. And although I can appreciate that taxis and limos and ride shares would all like to have less expensive insurance rates. If the decision of this committee is to do this vicarious liability, fine. The public may not be as protected, but at the end of the day, the businesses that are in this business would be treated the same.
Well, I've been told that limos do not have to carry $1 million of liability insurance. Is that true?
No, that's not true. That they carry, again, Center Beach, we're talking about a situation where the Uber and Lyft driver has to have a certain amount of insurance with a for-hire endorsement, or there's no coverage for them. And then there is the surplus line that the rideshare people put in to get coverage. This bill would, if there's no vicarious liability, then those independent contractor drivers, they would be sued, and it could very well be that the taxi, the limo, or the rideshare would basically not have liability. They wouldn't have responsibility for the incident that occurred. And if that's the decision the committee wants to make, we understand that, and I understand that, but I don't think it's fair to say people who do the same thing have to be treated. These people are getting some protection where small business people who have taxi or limo business that refers rides to others will not have that protection. So that's responsible.
Recognize Senator McLaurin for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you, Les.
Yes.
I'm having a hard time following your logic. I know what's good for the goose is good for the gander is sort of like a colloquial way of thinking. You know, these are cars and those are cars and they both are ride for hire. What's the difference? Well, it seems to me the rideshare companies have organized their entire business model around a clear legal difference between an independent contractor and employee, and that even I get the sympathetic small business angle. The companies have been around for a while. They're just organized under different legal principles, are they not?
No, 99% of the taxis and limos in this state have a employer-independent contractor relationship. They don't have employer-employee. Many times the individual provides their own car. Sometimes the individual is treated as an independent contractor. They do the same work. If we look at the unemployment statute that talks about transportation services, we treat limos, taxis, and ride shares all the same. They are not eligible for unemployment compensation. They are not deemed to be an employee. They are deemed to be an independent contractor, those drivers. So I can understand your view and your concern if the taxis and limo companies had an employer-employee relationship. They don't. In fact, many of the taxis have a system where you go to the taxi company, you will pay a certain amount of money per week for the use of the taxi, but you take care of your own fares, you get your own business, etc., and they qualify as independent contractors no differently than the Uber and Lyft drivers.
But I guess maybe then the relevant distinction comes down to cost of doing business and the applicable insurance that you have with carrier. Are you disputing that the requirements are lower, or that you don't carry you're saying, sorry, I need to restart my question. No, it's all right. I'm the one who's bumbling through this. Is your position that there is no material difference between the insurance that's actually carried by the rideshare companies versus your clients?
I would say that the taxis and limos that have to have commercial insurance, not surplus lines, they're not allowed to do that. That insurance is more expensive than the surplus lines.
But I'm talking about the coverage, that the coverage is not...
I think the coverage is better on the commercial insurance, and that's why a number of people who, and this has happened across the country, and I'm not here to bash Uber and Lyft in any way, but there's been litigation in other states about coverages when you're in a rideshare situation, as opposed to if you're in a taxi and a limo, where it's much clearer that the commercial insurance is covering you when you're in that car.
Okay, thanks.
Recognize Chairman Beach for one last question.
I just wanted to tell you, I just pulled up Georgia requirements for taxis. Liability, 25K / 50K / 25K. That is not $1 million. Les, I'm not saying you're lying, but I'm telling you that is not $1 million. And I knew that there was not $1 million liability policy for cabs.
I'm saying that the taxis insure for much greater amounts. You're pointing out the minimum coverage that would be used.
That's the requirements by Georgia law.
Right, and
Georgia
they have self-insurance opportunities also. I think if you look at the law on the ride share, there is not a per se requirement on $1 million that you talked about. And again, I think companies should insure to whatever the legislature says, but what I am suggesting is, why would this approach on vicarious liability be any different if the employer-independent contractor relationship exists for all three of these instances, limos, taxis, and ride shares?
All right, we're going to move on. Thank you, Les, for I think we got the gist of your argument. I'm going to ask Representative Leverett to come forward.
Can I submit the amendment for people to
If
look at?
you've met with everybody on this committee, so hopefully you've had the opportunity to give them an amendment. If any of them wish to make an amendment, that will be the pleasure of the committee. But
I can't distribute them to them to see.
I would rather you've done that before this meeting. I know you've already given it to one member of the committee.
Okay. And then I guess I would say in closing.
I think you're closed, Les. That's my point. So we're going to move on to Representative Leverett. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me just say, I would be glad to accommodate the gentleman's request for the amendment. I think the world of him and think the world of the folks he represents. I'm just concerned that that's going to drag the bill down because it'll make it a lot broader than it currently is. I do think there is a distinction, as I understand it, and I apologize, Chairman Moore, I kind of botched answering your question about the coverage. I'm glad Nick cleared all that up. But my understanding is the reason I believe this is palatable is that Uber and Lyft maintain that policy for their drivers. I got it wrong when I answered your question. And I don't think there's a similar requirement in the referral scenario. The person referring a customer to another driver doesn't have insurance to cover that other driver, unlike Uber and Lyft, and it's not of a substantial amount like that. So I understand the arguments that are being made where there is some analogy between these two, but I just think the practical reality of it is there are other differences with respect to insurance and other statutory requirements that do create a distinction where the bill makes sense as currently drafted and would not make sense if amended as it's being requested.
Any
so that's why I
questions for-
reluctantly have refused or declined to agree to the amendment.
I recognize Chairman Moore for a question.
Okay, so I've heard a lot about vicarious liability, but on line 59, it says under any theory of liability, including but not limited to vicarious or product liability.
That's true. There is a provision here on product because that has been, I think, tried on some occasions. But
any
you will
theory, that would
notice
be
there are-
direct, right?
Huh?
That'd be direct liability as well, right? Because it's
Well,
any
it
theory of
would,
liability.
but there are exceptions. The three exceptions in there are crafted to preserve the existing means of basically getting at Uber and Lyft's pockets. So we're trying to preserve the existing status of the law. There they have direct liability. It's not vicarious. They have done something or failed to do something they're required to do.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Recognize Senator McLaurin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Representative, again, I love trying to say the exact same thing you said, but in my words so I can hear myself talk. That's
do
one of
the
my
same
favorite
thing.
hobbies. But what it seems like is that, again, we're talking about costs, we're talking about delay in litigation. As you know, when you litigate a case, it may be that the right answer eventually comes out, but the less clear it is from the outset, the more work the courts do, the more work the parties do to get to that answer. And we have this conversation in the immunity context a lot. We're talking about governments, police, whatever, that there's something to be said for if you're going to end a case and you know you're going to end it early so that people don't pay the costs. And like I said, I think we've been doing that in other contexts in this committee. it seems like you're just making it. Look, it's a risky calculation to say no liability across the board except for these categories. But if you have reasonable confidence, it's not going to be product, it's not going to be vicarious, then you can go ahead and do that. And I think this represents that calculated risk. Am I sort of summing that up correctly?
You
Okay.
are. I mean, the main reason to an earlier summary that you gave is we're just putting this in a section of the code that the people taking these cases are likely to see, rather than putting it over in the employment security section.
So the more lawsuits are filed. If without the bill, more lawsuits would be filed.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. I don't see any other questions here. If anybody wants to get Les's amendment, feel free to get that from him. Now the board's lighting up. Leader Gooch.
Just want to make a motion so we don't have to order dinner tonight.
Yeah, I'm with you. That's why I'm trying to get this
All
moved
right.
along here. We recognize Chairman Beach.
Move due pass.
All right.
There you go.
Make a motion to table.
All right, let's hang on a second here. We have a motion due pass on LC 394702S from Chairman Beach. We have a second from Leader Gooch. All right.
Or McLaurin. It doesn't-
Oh, we'll go with McLaurin, sorry. I'm going to recognize Chairman Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I make a motion to table.
We have a motion to table from Chairman Moore and a second from Senator Mallow. Any discussion on the motion to table? Not seeing any discussion. All those in favor of the motion to table, please signify by raising your hand. 2 in favor. All those opposed, same sign. 7 opposed. That motion fails. We're back to the underlying motion. Any discussion on the underlying motion? Any amendments on the underlying motion? All those in favor of the motion do pass on LC 394702, please signify by raising your hand. 6 in favor. All those opposed, like sign. 3 opposed. Motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen. Who's going to carry this for you in the Senate?
We've made entreaties to Chairman Strickland. We have not secured that as of yet. I don't know if the chairman would have any interest in carrying, but
This is not in my sweet spot, Mr. Chairman. I'll be
all
honest
right.
with you. So,
we will try to nail those negotiations down.
can you let us know by the end of the day, please?
Huh?
Can you let us know by the end of the day?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, members. of the
Thank
committee.
you. Thank you. All right, we are going to, I'm going to try to do a quick bill really quick. If we could pass out H.R. 7. This is going to be our road naming bill. Representative Campbell, why don't you go ahead and come up to the podium here and let you all know what we've done. These are the bills that have become part of this omnibus bill. These, if you are included in this bill, it means you've gotten us your no conflict letter. It means you have gotten us your affidavit for your advertisement. And it means that if this bill passes in just a second here, that the Representative Campbell's bill will be inclusive of your road naming bill. So this includes the following bills. Senate Resolution 265 from Senator James. Senate Resolution 267 from Senator James. Senate Resolution 284 from Senator Anavitarte. Senate Resolution 348 from Chairman Moore. Senate Resolution 371 from Chairman Brass. Senate Resolution 378 from Chairman Beach. Senate Resolutions 413 and 414 from Pro Tem Kennedy. Senate Resolution 439 from Senator Hodges. Senate Resolution 463 from Leader Gooch. And Senate Resolution 454 from Chairman Beach. And then we have Senate Resolution 359 for Senator James as well, which I believe is the Tyler Perry one that you had the question about. So there was some discussion about that. That is included in the sub that was just handed out. If we do not have your road naming bill in here and you expect it to be, please get with us in our office and we will get that taken care of. Any questions about any of that? Thank you. And I do want to thank Orla and our team because they have been managing all of this in a spreadsheet and it's a lot to keep up with. And they made sure that we got all your road naming bills done. So thank you. Representative Campbell, tell us about your bill.
Well, this is a road naming bill for a sheriff and a mayor in Whigham, Georgia. And it's Highway 84 runs through Whigham between Donaldsonville and Bainbridge. And Whigham is right in the middle. So he died about a year ago, I think. Their mayor approached me about a road naming in Whigham he was the mayor at the time. He spent time in the police department in Cairo. He was a sergeant. He was many years a city councilman in Whigham, and for over 20 years he was the mayor of Whigham, and just is
Thank you.
very active in his community.
So, when y'all send us House bills, we like to perfect them here in the Senate. You sent us a 1-page bill. We made it a 23-page bill. Are you okay with what we added to it?
Absolutely.
All right, fantastic. I'll take a motion on LC 394800S. We'll recognize, I got a motion to pass from Vice Chair Dixon. Second from Leader Gooch, and Leader Gooch, you recognize.
I hate to do it, but on line 412, toward the back, this resolution was in honor of our trooper that died in the line of work last year in North Georgia. He lived in Lumpkin County, but on line 412, where we're going to dedicate the intersection of State Route 400 and Welchel Road / Burnt Stand Road, we need to strike Burnt Stand Road. So it's just Welchel Road, no / and no Burnt Stand Road.
All right, I'll take that in the form of a motion to strike Burnt Stand Road on line 412 as well as the /. Got a motion from Leader Gooch, second from Senator McLaurin. Thank you for that catch, Mr. Leader. Any other discussion? All those in favor of the resolution, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, like sign. Motion carries. And are you okay if I carry this for you on the floor and usher this across the finish line for you in the Senate?
I'm sorry,
Can I be your Senate sponsor? Can I be your wingman?
Yes.
Okay, I'd be happy to do it. All right. That was the House one. We forget. Yeah, it was this one, actually. Indeed, indeed. All right, thank you, Representative. We'll get this taken care of for you.
Okay,
Thanks for being here today. Thanks for sitting through all of that as well. Should have probably called you first. We were working on a sub. Senator James, you're good? Okay, perfect. All right, next up we have House Bill 638, Representative Silcox.
Good afternoon, Senators. Thank you so much for hearing my bill today. And this is my maiden voyage to the Transportation Committee as well, so I appreciate y'all being here. I also want to congratulate Senator Beach. I'm so proud of him, and I hope I get to come up and take a tour of Fort Knox. I've always wanted to do that, so congratulations again. Before I get started on the bill, I did want to comment and thank publicly Speaker Pro Tem Jan Jones. She has helped me substantially to narrow this bill to make it hopefully a lot better than it was. This bill is about bus rapid transit. And for those of you who are not familiar with that, the City of Atlanta has designated a lane that goes on all of these routes. Specifically for this purpose, and Bus Rapid Transit, or BRT stands for Bus Rapid Transit. And of course the idea of this is that these buses would be rapid because nothing would impede the lane. They could move continuously, they could move people quicker, and it would make it a more attractive way for moving around downtown. And I think particularly in light of all of the wonderful sports events we have coming to Atlanta, I think that this is a great opportunity for us to put our best foot forward as a city as well as the state, because if people can move around rapidly, they can spend more money and we can collect more tax dollars. So with that in mind, I do want to kind of walk through some of the ideas in the bill. These lanes, of course, are transit lanes, so other rapid transit agencies can use these transit lanes. I've had that question. Gwinnett County, Cobb County, their buses can also use these lanes. First responders can also use these lanes if there's an emergency or what have you. And the tickets from the cameras that would be placed on the buses would only be issued to parked vehicles. And I know personally, driving down Peachtree a lot of days, this is really a problem already all over the city. And to impede these lanes would prevent them from being rapid. This would also, MARTA's planning a campaign in terms of educating the public about this substantially before. So initially only warnings would be issued. After 6 months, then the parked vehicles could be issued a citation. The citation fines are low. They're identical to what we have for distracted driving in Georgia. The bill also requires that MARTA provide mandatory visible signage of the use of cameras in the bus-only lanes. Violations will not contribute points against anyone's driver's license and will not prohibit anyone from renewing their tag and will never result in an arrest. The camera vendor that MARTA is going to select will be paid for with grant funding, and there will be no administrative fees added to these citations. The fees may only be used by MARTA, not the City of Atlanta, for public safety initiatives to further the safety for all citizens in their buses as well as on the transit. And finally, the bill has a sunset of 5 years. If this doesn't work, then this goes away in 2030. So I would be happy to answer any questions.
And who do you have with you today?
Yes, I'm sorry. Jennifer LaRosa with MARTA Government Relations.
Great, thank you. So how does the camera know the car is parked?
How does the camera?
Know the car is parked.
Well, these cameras would take pictures of parked vehicles on the buses.
How does a still image know if the car is parked or moving?
It's a short video, and so it's stopped or parked cars. And so the video, I think, records about 8 seconds. And so we would send that with the violation to whoever the car is registered to. So you
What
can
if the
prove it.
car is parked for someone crossing a crosswalk?
I believe that there is certain points at the end of the line, at the end of the lanes, approaching other cross parallel streets or perpendicular streets. So at that point, it's no longer bus only. There are spaces throughout the route that are not just bus only for people turning, crossing crosswalks and such.
What if it's stopped for a person not crossing in a crosswalk? In other words, what I'm getting to is there a human review in this process?
Yes, there is a human
8-second
review, very much to the red light camera process.
Okay, well, I'd be careful doing that. Because, well, I won't comment on that. All right, we got you lit up the board here, but so let's just summarize where we're at. So we have these lanes that are dedicated for BRT only. Are these also the bike lanes? Or these we're seeing these
No,
lanes pop up?
these are
everywhere.
separate
Okay.
from bike lanes.
So we see these lanes out here outside the Capitol that I think we all think are pretty silly, that nobody ever uses, where we've taken public money, we've built road capacity, we've now taken away that road capacity for seemingly the pipe dream that people are going to start traveling Atlanta by bicycle, which is never going to happen.
That's on City of Atlanta.
So to walk us through the difference between these lanes and those lanes.
So for the bus-only lanes that we're doing here in Summerhill, and there's a map behind us here, the dotted lines are not bus-only. That's going to be mixed traffic. The solid lines are the bus-only.
Could you just bring that
parts of it.
forward so we can maybe get a closer look? Yeah, sure. So now that we can see that a little closer, will you say that again?
Put it.
So we see dotted lines and straight lines. Which lines are we talking about?
So the dotted lines are in mixed traffic, and the solid lines are bus-only lanes. This particular project is going to be the only BRT route probably within those 5 years.
So we're
for
looking
us
at the
to
purple line here, not the green line.
Correct,
just to
purple,
clarify.
sorry.
We are dealing with a singular route,
Mhm.
BRT route inside the city of Atlanta.
Mhm.
Does this law affect any other bus route or any other area in Georgia?
No, it does not.
Okay. So the cameras will geolocate such that they are able to detect, I assume is what's going to happen, or the human review will catch that. But regardless, the solid lines are what you're looking at capturing. What's the total length of road that we're talking about approximately?
Less than 6 miles
Okay.
total back and forth, I believe.
Okay. So the difference of these lanes and the bicycle lanes would be these are dedicated for y'all.
Correct. And for us to have funded this project and constructed it, we had to go through a federal funding process that does have a pretty competitive measurements to ridership, ensuring that it's going to be on there. So we can prove that that ridership would be there.
Did you all take existing capacity to create these lanes?
In some areas, yes.
And you did not in other areas, correct?
There are some areas we did not, some areas
So
we
you
did.
built new capacity in some and used existing capacity in
Mhm.
others. Great. as this started, you guys wanted to have cameras on the buses to enforce these bus lanes at all time, moving or parked cars.
Correct.
Part of what I think Representative Silcox is talking about that happened through this process is now is dealing only with parked cars.
Yes,
Is that
those
correct?
who are truly impeding the service that we're intending to have.
Okay. The current red light camera, you may or may not know this, but obviously there's a lot of anxiety in this building right now around cameras. Do those apply points to licenses, whereas to the driver's license? You may know this because the bill already came through the House. I don't know the answer to that. Do you know if is there a point
There are not points on my bill.
on your bill, but is there on the existing school cameras? Chairman Burns, no. Okay, so that you're apples to apples in that regard.
Right.
And walk us through your fine structure again. It's $50 to $150. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you highlighted this will never cause someone to, an outstanding fine will never cause someone to not be allowed to renew their tag.
Exactly.
I highlighted that as well. All right. I clarified nothing because the board is still lit up, so we will start from one side to the other. Start with Senator Still.
Thank you, Chairman Dolezal. Hi. Hi. So, for clarification, just Chairman Dolezal asked a lot of questions. I'm going to ask a couple more. Is this going to expand outside of this area? Is this a test pilot program that's going to be launching us into North Fulton or points beyond?
So we do have a few other BRT projects only within our MARTA region that are in the planning process, but not yet funded. And so each of those would be a case-by-case basis, but likely not going to be within the next 5 years. So this gives us an opportunity within the sunset time to be good actors in this space and prove that to you guys.
Can I?
Sure, keep going.
Folks in my part of North Fulton are very concerned that this is the tip of the spear of a massive MARTA expansion. How to best respond to that?
We have to abide by the 15th Amendment, which is the agreement that MARTA has with the jurisdictions in which we service. And the projects need to be on there and prioritized by the local electeds of those jurisdictions. And there's no BRT projects in that area that you're talking about.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, next up is Senator Mallow, recognized for a question. Or is that Senator McLaurin? Okay, sorry.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for being here. I am supportive of this. I mean, and just for the benefit of the committee, before I ask my question, one of the main reasons I'm supportive of it is that the local electeds in the State House, State Senate who cover these areas have really gone through the ringer with MARTA on this and have come out the other side being supportive of a thoughtful compromise with all the restrictions and parameters you discussed. 5-year expiration, no points, just the moving parking thing, trying to really come to the center. I guess, so my question is, would it not seem to be the case that with the speed cameras controversy, one of the reasons why people are so up in arms about that is kind of the unspoken secret is everybody speeds. And, everybody from time to time goes 5 miles per hour over the speed limit, maybe 10. Officers will tell you to your face, I'm not going to grab you unless you're doing whatever. And so it feels like a trap and it feels unfair when you roll through a school zone and all of a sudden that culture changes. But my understanding of the way that this is used is there's kind of a hard line. This is the bus lane. You're trying to create a culture, right? Because
That's right.
you're saying we have to educate the public on how these are used.
That's right.
The bus lane is just off limits. And so there's not going to be a situation where you think, oh man, selective enforcement, I got nabbed for something unfairly because some of the time you're allowed to do this. It is a black and white clear rule. You're just not allowed in the bus lane. And we're going to be really soft in our initial touch to you if you happen to park in the lane, which would frustrate the entire service. I mean, am I stating all that correctly?
Absolutely.
Yes.
There's no malicious intent here. And in fact, Jennifer spoke it very eloquently when she said that MARTA is trying to prove to be a good player in this space. Seriously. The lanes will be marked very clearly. They're going to be painted, and they will say bus only. And so it's not like you're driving along a street in a school zone where the road looks the same in front of the school, in the school zone and out of the school zone. It will be very clear that this is bus only. And of course, like you said, only the parked cars. And this is the biggest problem because it stops traffic.
Right.
And it doesn't just stop the buses because then people want to jockey, right? Because the traffic is stopped. So it's really, I think, a very good compromise.
And speaking of compromise, my last question is, I also represent a big chunk of North Fulton adjacent to Senator Still, and understanding the concerns that some people have about the word MARTA. When they think about MARTA expansion, a lot of times they're thinking about heavy rail. And so my last question in terms of compromise is, I mean, isn't it true that BRT represents a grand compromise of a lot of different transit options that have been considered for a very long time, and that it seems to be the fiscally conservative option that meets the ridership requirements that you described earlier? And as far as I'm aware, there are both Republican and Democratic members of the North Fulton delegation in that area at both the state and local levels that think that this is at least something to explore over the next 5 years.
And that's the idea, and that's the reason for the sunset, as you mentioned. And this is a great experiment, and I'm hopeful that it will work. I'm hopeful that it will help us in a very finite space and see if this will be effective.
Thank you, Representative.
Thank you.
Recognize, let's go with Chairman Dixon for a question. Is that you or is that Chairman Burns? Somebody's on over there, number 4.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to understand more what you're trying to do. Help me understand your ridership currently.
Well, the ridership went down severely during COVID, as you know, as mass transit did across the whole country and across the world. But they are coming back. The ridership is climbing, and I'm very hopeful, like I said, when we have these big events in particular.
So what is the ridership?
I am working on getting those figures for you from.
Maybe I asked for those last week, is that correct?
Right, and I
Thank you.
have asked my folks to get those for you so we can prove to
Give
you
me a
that we have it.
ballpark, 10%, 50%, 100%.
To what is ridership back from?
No.
Like bus
No,
50.
what is it? Is it, just give me a rough idea.
From COVID?
Well, give me COVID and then give me back and give me prior if you like.
I don't know the exact numbers offhand, but I do know that our bus ridership is back, I think, a little bit over 50%. It's growing. That and rail are both growing and climbing annually year over year.
I believe we
back
heard
to regular.
testimony from Janine Miller, Chairman, that it's half of what it was.
Half of what it was
pre-COVID.
Pre-COVID.
Now, I don't know that that speaks to this line, but I think that's
Yeah, I
speaking
think so.
to.
I don't know if that's particular related to this project. Could you give me your lane utilization? In other words, how much time during the day is the lane utilized by a transit bus that is loaded at some capacity?
So I can only speak to MARTA service on that, and the headway on this particular route would be 10 to 12 minutes. However, as the chairwoman mentioned earlier, we're not going to be the only transit system in that lane.
So I'd have a bus every 10 to 12 minutes, a MARTA bus.
Correct, on this lane.
And you could have other buses. Is that not true? There could
Correct.
be
Cobb or Gwinnett.
Cobb Link,
Exactly.
Gwinnett, those things. So one bus every 10 to 12 minutes to a dedicated lane. Is that correct?
At least.
Okay, so we'll acknowledge that maybe the rest of the transport facilities provide you double that. So once every 5 minutes. I'm just trying to get an idea of what kind of utilization, because if I'm a motorist and they took my lane.
Well, and this
And
was a
it's empty.
decision, and this was not MARTA's decision. This was the City of Atlanta's decision
I
to
understand.
dedicate this lane.
And it
So
was
I
their decision-
apologize
It
if
was their
there's,
decision to put bike lanes in front of the Capitol.
it was. And I'm
And-
sorry that we didn't have a say in that, but that's their decision.
It's a civil citation, is that correct?
Correct.
Yes.
And it's a civil citation. How do you enforce that?
There's really no way to enforce it because we are not taking away, we're not giving people points, and we're not taking away their ability to renew their license. But again, that is by design. It is a compromise, as Senator McLaurin said. This is a compromise to see if this works, and in good faith, it's going to only last 5 years.
I understand that, but I do see a challenge with enforcement.
I understand.
Not a fan of cameras, and we've kind of fought the camera fight on school zones, speed cameras.
Well, I will tell you that that MARTA was voted. Their MARTA Police last year received a huge award for their protection of people on MARTA, and they have an outstanding police force. And this will actually will help them not be confrontational as they have had to be in other cases.
One more, and I'll close.
Go ahead, the floor is yours.
School bus cameras. We use school bus cameras, which is the closest analogy I have to what you're proposing. And those have worked well. And they've substantially enhance the safety of a stopped school bus. So I support that.
Thank you.
I still have concerns about utilizing this technology to enforce a lane. And I'm just not there yet.
Understand.
But I appreciate your input.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, recognize Chairman Beach for a question.
First, a question. It's my understanding that if they take this transit safety class, that the first violation would be waived. Is
That's
that true?
correct.
Is that how I'm
Yes.
reading this? Okay.
Yes, and MARTA's going to
So
develop
that
that.
makes it's not a money grab then?
It is not a money
is
grab,
just
and the
trying
money is
to-
not going to City of Atlanta.
Okay.
And it does have to go towards public safety initiatives by MARTA.
Okay. The second thing, Mr. Chairman, and you can probably speak to this, to Senator Steele's point. We didn't get the mega grant for Georgia 400, but I think Commissioner McMurray is working to try to find the money to build the bus rapid transit lanes up north of Georgia 400 when we do the 16 miles of northbound and 16 miles of southbound. So I think you are correct, Senator Steele. I do know that they're going to build 2 platforms, one at Holcomb Bridge and one at North Point Mall for bus rapid transit. So they don't want to have to go and retrofit afterwards. So I think that's correct, Mr.
I think
Chairman.
that's correct.
That
You
is-
spoke to Commissioner McMurray
That's
about
correct.
bus rapid transit. Okay.
That's correct.
And, yeah, the only difference, just to point this out, is those will not be bus only. So this would not
Yeah.
apply to the 400 project.
Yeah.
Because
That is true.
they're going to have to work out the details between express lanes and bus
Right.
on that.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
FIFA's going to be here next year, and everybody's excuse for bringing a bill these days is FIFA. Why are we bringing this out till 2030 if this is somehow with an eye towards an event that's happening next year?
We have the Super Bowl, we have Final Four, we have a lot more events coming after FIFA.
And we'll have events after 2030 as well. I'm just
Yeah.
curious, if this is a pilot, 5 years is a long time for a pilot. How did we arrive at that date?
And not just for the events. I mean, that's where this particular route is, and so it's going to serve a lot of visitors going to the Beltline from rail, because a lot of the people coming in town for that particular event are going to be foreign and probably not driving, and so that's one key selling point. However, to Mr. Senator McLaurin's note earlier, this is a new mode to the state, across the country for that reason, and it is really hard for us to expand transit at the price that rail currently is. So this is a mode that we're trying to test as in place of that's more flexible than rail is. So it's an ongoing mode that's going to be there, and we're trying to utilize in different ways than just for visitors.
I'm going to ask you to find this for me in the bill. You probably can't. You may not be able to do it instantly, so I'll just give you a second. I'll take another question. I'd like to see the portion that references the human review.
There's not a portion on the human review in the bill. There's not, because MARTA hasn't selected the vendor yet.
Okay.
That is what we understand from one of the proposed vendors.
Okay. I would either want to see that added to this bill or either today or when we take it to the floor. 'Cause I think that is going to be very important. The non-human review, I think, was less important when you first had this idea that you were going to ticket everybody who is in these lanes. But if we're somehow going to only be limiting this to stop or parked vehicles, I think you've got to have.
I think Jenna might have a comment to that.
Okay. So it is in there.
Thank you, Jenna. But it doesn't
Representative
use
Silcox,
this.
you're better than you thought you were. You've got it in the bill
It
already.
doesn't.
Phone a
But
lawyer.
it doesn't say human review, so I knew it didn't say that. I knew it didn't.
Senator McLaurin, would you do me a favor and work something up for us on that? And we'll keep going around, but if you don't mind working on that with your little spinning pencil there. Okay, all right. Senator Still.
Spinning pencil. Oh my God.
Chairwoman, Senator Burns asked a question, and you and I had a similar conversation previous to this, where you had described to me the type of vehicles that are parking in the BRT. So, Senator Burns, your question, who's parking these lanes, what's happening through this section of Atlanta, the issue primarily, as you described it, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's primarily delivery services drivers that are using that to illegally park. And what happens is because these are dedicated lanes, the buses are frozen.
Correct.
And they can't move.
And I appreciate that, Senator Still, because I'll also say that Jennifer and her team have located places near all of these primary delivery locations where they can park to deliver things instead of parking illegally in the lane. So there are delivery places located.
Right. So
these aren't personal vehicles for the most part.
No, these are commercial vehicles.
Right.
That are parking and blocking lanes, and then we're taking the R out of BRT at that point because we can't move these buses along.
You got it.
Exactly. And also the geometry behind the stops and
Well,
the
if
bus,
you add 'em all up.
the BRT buses for this is a bit different than a regular bus. It's level boarding, so there's not a way for us to park near any curbside to let people off where we do now, and the bus can move down. And so we have to park at the actual stations, the stops that are designated for this. So if someone's parked anywhere near that, then it does stop the service. Where we could go around a parked car so we can keep service moving as long as it's not one of the stops, that just hinders everything we're trying to do here.
Got it.
I'm going to come back to my previous comment, 'cause I think this may already be in the bill. Line 107, a copy of a certificate sworn to or affirmed by a certified peace officer employed by a law enforcement agency authorized to enforce this code section, stating that, based upon inspection of recorded images, a motor vehicle was stopped or parked in a transit vehicle lane, and that such stopping or parking was not otherwise authorized by law, shall be prima facie evidence of the facts contained therein. So I don't know. I'm going to recognize you.
Mr. Chairman, putting on my law firm associate hat, not partner. Yeah, maybe someday, sir. Yeah, it's about 5 more votes in the Senate for that. So what I want you to know is what you're trying to do in terms of this is right now written as the basis for a conviction. I do think it's infirm potentially in the sense that all the peace officer has to certify is that the inspection happened, and it doesn't say what kind of inspection. So one idea would be to say,
I'm not concerned with the conviction. I'm concerned with before the thing goes in the mail.
So that's what I was getting at. Is I figure you don't even care about the conviction. You don't want a violation to be sent out unless human inspection is already.
I'm just thinking about this. You know, there's the unintended consequences, right? We've heard of these school zone cameras that are picking up vehicles on the back of tow trucks,
right?
Which never would have been, and human review would catch that.
Right. So if you want it before the notice even goes out, right now we're embedded in like subparagraph D of a conviction section, right? So if you go back, we're on page 5 of the bill, you'd have to go back all the way to page 3, I think, to see that it's, subsection C at line 53, a violation shall be punished. So we're basically outlining the standards for conviction. If you wanted to put human review, what I would do is sort of build it into like an RFP and say, whichever vendor is selected shall include human review of footage or inspection prior to the issuance of a citation in the mail, and you just put that in. What you and I can do is work on a floor amendment and then just kind of figure it out with y'all and put it on before we send it back.
All right. Chairman Beach, you had your light on for a while. Sorry, Senator Avatar. Chairman Avatar.
So just quick question for the record, just kind of piggybacking off the Senator Still, just want to make sure for my people at home, just this is not tip of the spear bringing transit, BRT, or anything to Paulding County, Georgia, correct?
Correct. No. No. I think you might be
100%.
My concern, I know this is just one route, but, we have, the infamous trolley that goes nowhere, and I guess there's ghost riders that
which we
literally
only
ride it.
inherited.
And the trolley was not City of Atlanta's, was not MARTA's idea.
I understand,
City
but
of Atlanta.
it's still here in downtown Atlanta, and you can walk to it, get to it, Uber to it.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, we talk about all the modes of transportation since we're covering that today, taxi to it. But I just want to make sure that, those sensitivities are, transparent and talked about in the bigger picture, because I do think, to Chairman Dozal's point about timing, FIFA's happening pretty quickly. I personally do not think this is going to have any impact on FIFA. I'm more interested in hearing, what is the impact really in those neighborhoods, this BRT is going to run through, because it seems like they're the ones that are mostly going to use it, not necessarily the people up on this end of the route. But maybe
Senator,
that's just me.
I would share with you that MARTA has a great video that I'd love to send to you, because they actually did interviews with a lot of the people in the Summerhill neighborhood. And a lot of students, a lot of small business owners, a lot of people are really excited about this BRT route. And it will help their neighborhood, and it is a great thing for them.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, I'm probably actually the only one on this in this committee that was probably around when one of the first MARTA train stations in Doraville was built. So I'll look at it, but I just want to make sure that those sensitivities with the bigger picture, we're not doing something that's going to cost the taxpayers a bunch of money, and then I think the security concerns being raised.
Chairman Burns, recognized for a question.
Yeah, a question and first a comment. 1974, I was a resident of Atlanta, and I voted for MARTA. So I want you to know I've been around a while. And I have concerns, and I think I've expressed this. I would like to ask, is there any reporting requirement during the pilot period?
There's not a reporting requirement written in here, but we at MARTA have already discussed that we would add that to the MARTOC report, which you can request as chair.
I would like, at a minimum, an annual report of the number of citations, the amount of dollars collected, and the utilization of those funds.
And MARTA does prepare an annual report that they submit to me as MARTOC chairman, and I'm sure they'd be happy to include that for you, Senator Burns.
I'd appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman Burns. Senator Mello.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't live in Atlanta, and I wasn't here when MARTA was created, but I have rode the bus for a long time in Savannah. And so my question is, will ridership increase because of the amount of time that someone will wait on the bus will be decreased if the lanes are moving? Because I have been on Peachtree, and on both sides, you have people hit the hazard lights and jump out and deliver stuff back and forth, and you could be in the through lane and literally have to stop and go around. So my question would be, is it your hope that ridership would increase? And I did notice the city of Atlanta is requiring all employees to come back in to City Hall. So is it your hope that this bus will have them parked? Do you have any rideshare parking lots for people to park and hop on the bus so they're not downtown per se?
Exactly. We're hoping for a positive feedback loop. You ride, it's faster. Gosh, this is way faster than being in my car.
And we have seen ridership increase in some partner transit cities, such as DC and New York, who have used BRT, and this type of enforcement. Ridership has increased in those areas on these routes.
Senator McLaurin.
I've got a comment and then a motion. The comment is, I really think that if Senator Burns were to vote for this and do a TikTok of himself endorsing the idea, that would create the kind of positive feedback loop and public engagement.
We would share that on all of our social sites.
There we go. Perfect.
And with that, I would make a motion that we do pass the LC 394730S.
We have a motion to pass from Senator McLaurin. We have a second from, I believe it's Chairman Dixon, correct? Correct.
Thank you.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Any amendments? All those in favor of the motion, please signify by raising your hand.
Great.
You're up. 7 in favor. All those opposed, like sign. 2 opposed. Motion carries 7-2. Who is carrying this for you in the Senate?
Senator Still.
Okay. Senator Still. Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Thank
I
you all
really
for being here
appreciate y'all.
today.
Have a great
We are
day.
adjourned. Thank you, guys.